Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, attorney Sonia Madison. How you doing, Sonia?
I have been waiting all week for you to ask me that question because this
Yeah.
week has been such an inspiring and motivating week, starting with the When Will Black Women Call, which we'll get into later, but just hearing so many women talk about the importance of this election as well as how we can rally and galvanize around Kamala was inspiring, and seeing so many women that I've admired join the call was equally just wonderful. And then at the middle of the week, my governor, staunch Republican, my governor here in Georgia, actually stepping in when the Georgia superintendent tried to take away advanced placement for African American studies as part of a class curriculum, getting some accreditation for that. He stepped in,
Hmm.
and now that class has been protected. I'm like, wow, this can't get any better. And of course, yesterday we had the
Look
opening
at God.
of the Olympics. I know, right? I'm like, I mean, this is like I said, it's been a really great week.
What did
So,
you think about the opening ceremony?
I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy around that opening scene. I mean, to be fair, I watched bits and pieces of it because I'm actually in Tennessee for an alumni reunion at my high school. So we were watching bits and pieces. So I've missed the
40
opening.
year? I won't ask you to tell which year it is, but we all know it's closer to 40 already.
But so I didn't see the opening scene with the Last Supper and the drag queens. I will say what I saw because I came in right when they were showing, I want to say Puerto Rico. So I was like, well, I can't miss the United States little yacht because I'm thinking they're gonna have a gorgeous double, triple decker yacht. And I was a little bit disappointed when I did see what they because Sweden's yacht was like, woo, this is gorgeous. The
Hmm.
United States, I was like, all right,
Eh,
they came in, I guess.
oh, it is. I
um,
wasn't terribly impressed by it myself. Those portions of it that I saw, like you said, I was in and out. I did see a lot of them with, there's a lot of homosexual innuendo and references. Yeah, and I get it. They homosexuals are a valuable part of our society now, and they're an integral part of our society, and so they deserve representation. Um, doesn't mean that I need to watch it
well, and I
necessarily.
think that's always a conversation as to I mean, is sexual orientation in general deserving of being put out in the media like that? Because I mean, I think to some degree, I don't necessarily think anyone should really be advocating for seeing sexual orientation in general as something that we need to talk about as we're celebrating the Olympics. So, but if you feel as if, well, the only way that I feel as if I'm present if I see a rainbow flag, again, I just caution people from using sexual orientation to define them. I don't
Yeah.
care if hetero or homosexual.
And I will say those people who would defend it would say it's not a matter of demonstrating sexual orientation. It's just a matter of expression of love. And you got the media shows all different types of expressions of love. Some of those expressions are homosexual, some of them are heterosexual. I mean, historically, they have always been heterosexual. There is another type of love that exists out there now called
I
homosexual
wouldn't even say
or
historically.
polyamorous, but
Okay, so I don't even think historically it's always been because if you look at movies and if you look at history, they don't even oftentimes they shied away from even showing heterosexual sex because I think it used to just be taboo to talk about sex in general.
well, we're
So
talking
I
about
think
how
they
far back
were
historically we go.
I
But
know. So
I
I
mean, if you
mean,
want
I
to go
just
back to the 1910s.
I'm sounding like Mac. Let's go make America great again. But I mean, I just would challenge the whole theory that, well, historically, heterosexual has always been represented. So I'd say, no, historically, sex in general has been taboo to talk about.
But it's always been, but love has not been taboo. And even though they may not have sexualized that love historically, they have always shown the love between a husband and wife. Even go back to Leave It to Beaver, the Cleavers and Lucille Ball and even the Honeymooners, the older shows that I guess as far back as I can go. The
I'm gonna say
closest, the
because
closest.
I was still caution against that because I think they've all love should not be defined by sex. We've seen two women love each other as friends. We've seen men love each other as friends. We've seen men and women love family members. I mean, love shouldn't just be defined as sex.
That's my point. That's
Yeah.
my point. And so what they've done was showed historically they have shown heterosexual love without any issues. Now the closest thing in the old movies that you would have gotten to by homosexual love would have probably been the Three Stooges. You can
Well,
tell
and I guess
that
I'm
these
still saying
were
there were
these.
shows like Girlfriends. There, I'm just like, because I still think you're putting it in the context of sex. And I'm saying there has always been love shown between a mother and daughter. There's always been love shown between father and his kids. There's always been love shown between two friends. There's always been love shown between cousins. And so to say, oh, love is only represented by sex and historically it's only been represented
No,
heterosexually, I would push back on that in
I'm
general.
not saying I'm not saying that by any means. What I am saying is that romantic love has always been demonstrated by heterosexual relationships. And so romantic love has nothing to do with sex, which is the point that I'm making. Romantic love has nothing to do with sex. And you can demonstrate romantic love without it. I think one of the scenes that I saw was even just, homosexual. Actually, it was probably bisexual encounter where you look just their interactions with each other gave some real sexual innuendo, though, no doubt about it. But still, the point
You
was
want to see
was
it, sure.
the point was that they alluded to a romantic relationship, and it's these allusions to romantic relationships that have always been heterosexual. Now you see some of these same allusions being homosexual, and so be it. That's what the world is. That's what the world
But
is.
I
So.
don't like when people are saying, because going back to the opening scene that again I'm assuming is the controversy that even you're referencing when they're showing the drag queens, because that to me, I don't even think they're alluding to sex per se in that. I think they're just more so alluding to, okay, if you gender identity or and so you
Or
know
fluidity for that matter.
yeah, yeah.
We were on a cruise last week, and probably the most famous person on the cruise, most notable person on the cruise was a guy named Paris, because Paris had a nice little goatee, was very flamboyant and dressed in women's clothes the whole week, and was making sure that he would be seen. And it was interesting because at several different times in the cruise, I saw people, young kids, and everything running up wanting to take pictures with him as if he was a celebrity, and he basically became a celebrity on that cruise. Excuse me, on that cruise, partly because I think he challenged societal norms. And maybe it's not challenging society norms. So maybe it's breaking free from some of the constraints. Maybe it's perceived as breaking through from some of the constraints that societal norms place on people and saying, I'm going to be free, I'm going to be fluid, and I'm going to embrace life in every aspect thereof. And maybe people honor that, and maybe it's not that people are celebrating transgenderism or homosexualism. Maybe they're just celebrating freedom to be who you are and to express who you feel you are, regardless of what society tells you norms you need to fit within.
I guess speaking of Kamala's, I guess campaign ad, "Freedom" by
Yeah.
Beyonce
Yeah,
is the
right.
one. But to go along with that, so I mean, I I'm like I'm not necessarily offended, hey, but I don't want people saying, oh, because I've seen this online, already seen on social media, oh, this is why you can't vote for Kamala because this is what she wants to teach our children and the like, and I'm like, okay, hold on. First of all, don't put Paris into the United States. Secondly, Kamala is a VP
Uh-huh.
running for the president's position. So don't make it seem like she needs to come out on behalf of the United States and go say something to the French folks that are putting on the Olympics. But third, most importantly, don't allow such distractions from the main thing. I mean, we are here to celebrate the athletes' hard work for years and years. Some of them devoted pretty much their entire lives for this moment. Let's not allow the celebration of that be taken away because you didn't like a scene.
You sound like a MAGA crowd talking about Colin Kaepernick. kneel and taking a kneel. It's the same argument that they gave. They
I don't
say, why is it
explain
taking
it.
away from, huh?
I was
But
going to say, you explain to me how it's the same argument.
so because they people have made the I guess you can make the same argument. Don't
Let's see
lose
you reach
sight.
in making that same argument. Let's see how far you reach
You
to
can
make the
no,
equivalence.
the point is, I guess you can make the same argument to say we shouldn't be distracted from the main purpose of why we're here, and that is to enjoy the games. Well, the people will say also that those persons, we shouldn't conduct those same acts, like kneeling during the anthem, because it distracts from the purpose of why we're there in the first place, and that's just enjoy a good football
Well, for those that are going to make that reach that you just tried to, let me
game.
again explain the difference. One, I am telling people in general, do not allow this distraction. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what Paris decided to do. I'm saying if you find that offensive, then continue to focus on the talent that are the athletes. So if you found Colin Kaepernick offensive, I'm not asking you to go protest against it. I'm not asking you to go get him fired, which is essentially what happened to Colin Kaepernick. I'm asking you to say, well, fine, turn your eyes since you don't want to talk about the awareness that he's bringing, and then wait for the kickoff. Okay.
There's that's the point. That's the point right there. Is that if it was easily ignored, it would not be able to bring the
And it is
awareness. It would
easily
not
ignored.
if it were easily ignored, it would not bring the awareness that people seek for it to bring.
Oh,
And
no,
that
and again, you're making reaches because people find things to complain about. To me, the reach of banning the Olympics because of that picture is ridiculous. Just like the reach of having Colin Kaepernick fired because he kneeled is utterly ridiculous.
that's true. I mean, nobody's going to cancel the Olympics because of that. No question about it. I mean, that's a whole
Well,
different
you keep
scale.
saying that, but I
But
mean,
but what I'm saying is that it's
they're
not easy.
in the opening ceremony key thing instead of okay, there were athletes parading in on yachts, and y'all just want to focus on this opening picture.
Yeah, why? Because that's the biggest audience that they can possibly have to bring a cause to the awareness of people, and that's the whole purpose of it all. It's just to bring awareness to the plight of people who feel like they have been neglected and overlooked and or disenfranchised, fairly or unfairly. They still feel that way when they get an opportunity to display that and to break free from those inhibitions or constraints, then they will. But anyway,
So, how was your week before we get even further down the rabbit hole?
my week was recovering from the week of vacation. So it's been a every time you go on vacation, you come back, you get slammed with all the work that built up while you were gone. I will say that fortunately, it was not as bad as it could have been. So it could have been a lot more
Can always
draining.
be worse, right? Can always
Yeah,
be worse.
I did try new coffee. I'm sitting here sipping on a new kind of coffee this morning, and it's a what do you call the thing? It's a mushroom coffee. Several different types of mushrooms put together. They're supposed to be better for you. I'll let you know how it works out. It's supposed to help with your mental acuity and antioxidants and
I
immune
was gonna say
system
you're gonna have
boost,
to fix it.
digestive
We're gonna
health.
get too many people saying you're on mushrooms, so you're gonna have to fix it. I don't.
So I'm trying it. The taste of it is actually not bad. It actually tastes pretty much like regular coffee, or at least the kind of coffee that I like, a little bit stronger coffee. So I'll let you know if it's helped my GI health at all, or my immune system as it's supposed to do. So
So it started with where were you when you heard that Joe Biden was stepping aside?
this is one of those moments.
In his
It's like 9/11. And where were you? Where were you when the OJ Simpson started playing? Yeah, this is on that level. I was actually in the airport, returning back from our cruise. Excuse me, and reached over and said, Joe Biden dropped out. And I was like, guess you found out before I did. So I said, okay, let me get this news here. So we were just sitting in the airport on a flight that was delayed, waiting to return home. So, how about yourself?
I was with some of my college alumni. I guess it's just been alumni reunion month for me, but I was
Apparently
with
so.
some of my college alumni, my undergrad, and so I was trying not to react too much because I went to a predominantly white institution, and and a friend of mine who I dragged her to come with me because I knew I'd probably be the only black person there. Um, she turned to me and said, "Oh, Shade Room is reporting that he dropped out." And I, because if she had not given me the source, I was like, "Oh, this more Democrats hollering what they're gonna do." Um, but so then I had to pick it up, and my heart dropped. It
Mm.
really did, and I just felt like, "Oh my gosh, this week is continuing to get worse." And that's why again I stressed starting with the win with black women that lifted me back up a little bit. But I did hate the fact or the feeling that he did it because people forced him to versus doing it because he felt like he couldn't do the job anymore. And even in listening to his speech, I mean, you can tell it wasn't about his competency level. It was about feeling as if not too many people support or rally enough for him to then win. And since the weight of democracy is at play here, because I truly believe if Kamala were to win, that at least I hope that the Republican Party would revamp and start over. And I think that would be important if they got themselves together so that we can go back to having a little bit more robust debates about policies. I feel like then that was the reason, and I just hate the feeling that a guy who's done so much was pushed out by his party.
I don't know that he was pushed out by his party. He was pushed out by his supporters. The problem was that 80% of Democrats actually wanted somebody else other than Joe Biden.
If you believe polls,
And
and I don't trust
if you
them
believe
polls.
polls, if you believe polls, but that's the only thing you have to go by. You're not going person to
I
person
mean, you could
across
go by the fact
America.
that I mean, he won the primary vote during the
That's
ballot.
because he
But
was
if we
unopposed, pretty much. He was
My
largely
ballot was not
unopposed.
unopposed. My ballot has several people
Largely,
on there. Okay, so
largely unopposed. There were people who were unknowns.
it's just what you want to trust. Well, like you said, if you want to trust polls and find that that's what you will stake your
So
art.
I see that the weight of democracy was at play, but I also see that the levers of democracy were at play. That is that if you find or if you believe, if every evidence points toward the fact that the people who you're supposed to be represented don't have confidence in you, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to back down. You're supposed to step out. And I appreciate that. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily disheartened by the fact that people lost confidence. It's just a reality, a fact of life. People look at things and say, we no longer have confidence in you. It's not a personal dig against you. We think you're a great person, but we just don't think that you're the guy to win at this time. And I'm not saddened by it by any means. Saddened by the fact that it looked like the American people spoke and he listened. Why would I be sad about that? But that's what
Again,
it looks like.
I said that's your perspective. I think the American people are also begging him to stay. So that's your perspective on
You
how you
do you
saw it.
really you think that greater than 50% of Democrats wanted Joe Biden as their primary choice?
Again, they voted and he won the ballot vote. So
You
yes,
can
that was what was on the ballot and that was voted for. And then we already see that Republicans are already going to use that talking point about how our votes were discarded by, have him stepping down and replacing with Kamala. But and so I also dispute your argument that every evidence points to this. No, because then you're again ignoring the vote that happened during during
I'm
the
not ignoring the vote.
but
I'm
nonetheless,
qualifying the vote.
but
Qualifying the
nonetheless,
vote.
as we see, and again, that's why it's so important to really understand how these social media algorithms work. But as you see in these algorithms, whatever perspective you have, they will push out those messages to corroborate your perspective. No doubt. That's why I hear when people say, oh, definitely Trump is going to be Biden. I don't doubt those algorithms are then pushing out that same message. So that's why, I mean, to trust that, oh, based on what I'm seeing, yeah, the majority of America wanted him to push out. I'm not going to make that conclusion, but I understand why you draw it.
Let me say this. My conclusion was not based off of an algorithm. My conclusion was based off of
So
a
you think.
visual, off of not my mushroom coffee, not mushroom
All right.
coffee either.
All right. My conclusion was based off of whatever my brain formed, not seeing anything that was presented in front of me, ignoring all news.
No, I believe my truthful eyes in that moment. When you look at a split screen against a befuddled, feeble appearing Joe Biden, and that debate was a huge eye opener for many Americans. It was a high eye opener for me because, as what's been true, Joe Biden really hasn't been in the public without a script in the past. And certainly, and when he is, it's only for a limited duration of time. And so we got a peek into his mental status and or his mental acuity. Doesn't mean that he's cognitively unable to perform well in the position, but his presentation was less than awe-inspiring or confidence-inspiring. In the debate, it certainly wasn't. So you can say, okay, well, maybe that was just one debate. Well, every subsequent appearance that he had, only thing that he really did in most cases was reiterate the concern. And even the days leading up to his final decision, you could see that there was a noticeable decline, maybe because he was sick, maybe because he had the COVID. And so he was taking a couple steps behind. He would stutter, stumble a little bit. He looked like he got more stiff, more rigid. Those things right there are visual images that are kind of hard to overcome. And they have nothing to do with the algorithms that you're being fed through social media. They have everything to do with what you're witnessing with your own eyes. And if we just did not witness those things with our eyes, then maybe we would have still had a little bit more confidence in Joe Biden ability
Again,
to
we'll
beat,
leave that to the
ability
viewers.
to beat
We'll leave that to the
Trump.
viewers. I don't want to spend, I know we've debated this over and over, so I don't want to keep harping, but we'll leave that to the viewers, whether or not you felt like the American population was begging him to step down or if that was, again, pressure from elite donors or the like.
Mm-hmm.
But now he has endorsed Kamala. Were you
Oh, let me say
surprised by
this
the
too.
endorsement?
But you're right. In order to run a campaign, you're talking about the donors. The donors is a key part. If you can't run a campaign, and I think that was probably the part that tipped him over was the fact that donors were saying, "Hey, we're not putting money into you because we don't have a confidence in you." And basically that's what makes almost any politician decide to drop out. They all
And that's
drop
why
out when they
I felt
lose the
like that was
money.
disheartening, which is why, again, I say that's disheartening. But nonetheless, that is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
um,
But let's before we talk about that, before we talk about Kamala, but what do you think about the fact that donors have that much influence over our elections? I mean, they always have. I call this cynically, I call it it's an oligarchy. Truth of the matter is because whoever has the money pretty much pulls the levers of democracy here.
well, obviously, it would thwart your level of democracy. I don't classify it as donors have that much weight as it relates to the election. I do classify it as donors have that much weight as to the politicians,
Or
and
to the
to
candidates.
the candidates. Yeah.
Mm.
And I mean, again, I do think that's unfortunate because you are supposed to represent the people, and it turns out, it seems like you are representing an elite few, but I think you see that even more so in Trump than anything before. Not only because he's been very clear how much he's in debt, he's been very vocal that, hey, corporate guys, y'all need to get in me. I'm giving y'all the tax cuts that you need. I'm going to make sure X and X is available for you. So he's very pointed on that. And that's another reason why to go to the leap of, oh, the American people were saying, hey, no, step aside. I'd say no, because we were still seeing the choice here. And so I don't think that just because of one night meant this guy wasn't going to win. But I do understand your point of having not as much confidence in even him as your representative. So who has the money has the power.
Yeah.
It is what it is, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that then as we get these opportunities to get more of this money and use it for influence and hopefully vote for the candidate that doesn't then put barriers for us to then get those opportunities. Um, you know,
I will
I
say
mean, what are we gonna do? What you gonna do?
one thing that's I think encouraging about Kamala Harris, as Trump calls her, Kamala, and all of his
Don't
acolytes.
Don't do that, Kamala. Don't disrespect her. She is our
I,
vice president.
I'm not
Do not
disrespecting her.
disrespect her.
I'm just pointing out the lunacy of Trump and all of his supporters. You listen to anybody, you can tell who listens to Trump a lot, and on the news stations because they all say Kamala. So, but that's one of the benefits of Kamala Harris's campaign is that right now, not a lot of the big donors, elite donors, have really gotten behind her yet. But the money that she's bringing in, record breaking fundraising, is coming from small donors, which is coming from the American people.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that completely because Netflix has backed her. I mean, we've seen a lot of big names come out and back her. So I don't want the narrative to be like, oh, it's all grassroots. No, no,
Yeah.
no. And to your, I think some of the things again why President Joe Biden felt pressured was because people were stopping. But as soon as the endorsement came out, they opened their wallets back up, and the flood
Do
of
you not
votes.
think that that's a vote of confidence? I mean, there's nothing much, there's no bigger
Again,
vote of
if you're going to
confidence
put your vote of
than people
confidence
who
on
will
elite
open their
donors,
wallet.
if you're going to put your vote of confidence on elite donors, then fine, yeah, that's a vote of confidence. But if you're going to put your vote of confidence on what you have done, there was vote of confidence on what he had done for the past 4 years. Even this year alone, the fact that he was not only dropped like another student loan release, but also the IRS supported receiving over $1 billion in funds from the Inflation Act that he passed. That is also going to help with our deficit. And so, I mean, there was confidence in other areas outside of that debate.
Right.
But I understand if you're going to put your vote of confidence on, well, are you getting the elite donors? Then
No, no,
yeah,
no.
there was a loss of
Even are
confidence
you getting the
there.
grassroots donors? Are you getting the grassroots donors? We
We
saw.
typically don't talk a lot about grassroots donors unless we're talking about local, but we're seeing, like you said, like you're saying now, we're seeing some of that grassroots in Kamala right now.
So my question to you is, why was Joe Biden not getting the grassroots donations
And again,
as
I'm not,
Kamala is?
that's your conclusion. I'm not saying Joe Biden wasn't getting the grassroots donations because
He wasn't getting them like that.
I do think he was getting grassroots donations. Now, again, I think it was a lot of the elite donors that were
Hmm.
stopping their donations, but not necessarily the grassroots. No.
Yeah. No, he didn't get the kind of grassroots that Kamala got. So,
Well, I
I've
think we have to admit, at least for me, I don't think people have seen what Kamala has gotten this past week since Obama. And so to that point, candidates since then have not really gotten that grassroots. And before Obama, we weren't seeing it to the level that we saw in Obama. And so, to put this all as in, oh well, this is why it's going to work because grassroots. Well, this is an excitement that is new to some degree. This isn't typically what we have seen in presidential elections.
right. I think a measure of the grassroots donations is perhaps our most effective measure of the support by the people, as opposed to support by big donors. I could care less about how much big donors are pouring into you because I know they've got their own selfish intents. But when I see a surge of everyday Americans wanting to give to a campaign, wanting to get in line and volunteer because they're enthusiastic now about the candidate, then to me that tells me that this is what the people have been looking for and waiting for.
Well, let's hope so, because it's not as if Trump doesn't have his steel.
Yeah, and that's the point. That's the point. That's what his
Still
people have
supporters.
been looking
So
for.
it's still gonna be, it's at least and it's so sad to say that this is still gonna be a tight race. It's so sad saying that. It is so sad saying that because we already see some of the racial and misogynistic ads that are coming out or talking points that are coming out. And it's extremely disgusting. And the fact that we've had to have top Republican leaders tell their fellow Republican
Yeah,
candidates, as well as party members, please do not resort to racial slurs. Stop saying DEI. Stop calling her a DEI candidate. The
right.
fact that they have to say that, to me, lets me know like this is ridiculous that this is tight.
Yeah, I do want to talk about something that I'm sure you probably don't want to talk about, and that is the likelihood that all of this was planned in the first place. I have friends, Eric, who's been a frequent guest on the show,
This is a conspiracy theorist.
conspiracy theorist,
Everything.
at least for a year and a half, has been saying that Joe Biden is not going to be the nominee. Before he even announced that he was going to run again, Eric Medash and several other very conservative people who track around in a lot of the conspiracy theories have been saying that Joe Biden is going to initially run and then he's going to bow out and he's going to be replaced by somebody. And their suspicion was that it was going to be Michelle Obama, and then that would stimulate all kinds of vigor and enthusiasm for it. And lo and behold, this is what happens. The same thing happens. Coincident? I don't know. We have to
Well, it's
still
not
at
the
least
same thing
consider
because
it.
it's not Michelle Obama, so it's
It's
not the
not Michelle Obama, but
same.
he's
So
the bottom line is that
it's not the same thing.
when we prophesy in part. And I'm not saying that they
Oh,
were
that's what
prophesying.
you now you're calling him a
I'm
prophet.
not saying that. I'm not saying they were prophesying, and I'm certainly not calling him a prophet. But the point is that when somebody predicts that a turn of events is going to happen, and that happens with striking similarity, you have to lend some credence to. At least I choose to
Say,
lend
do it.
some credence to the possibility, at least because you and I never know what goes on behind the scenes. Think of this. Imagine this. I can imagine a strategy where they say in their backdoor dealings to say, we really want Kamala Harris to be the nominee to succeed Joe Biden. But we know that if there was a primary, Kamala Harris probably would not get the nomination. It would probably go to some white man because that's the way that America thinks right now. They're not ready for a woman president, let alone a woman of color to be president. We've seen that the way that they rejected Hillary Clinton. Now, Clinton came with her own set of baggage, but they would create baggage for Kamala as well, even if she didn't have enough on her own. But they would conspire. Imagine again that they conspired to say the only way that we're going to get Kamala to be the nominee is to have Joe Biden insist that he's going to stay in this race and appear more and more feeble, increasingly feeble, to the point where people start losing confidence in him. For all we know, that debate encounter debacle could have been totally staged, and if it was totally staged, it's a tremendous setup for what was about to happen afterwards. Weeks of just talking about Biden needs to get out the race, weeks of people just spilling in and more legislators and Democratic operatives saying you need to drop out. And then this is the part that really got me was that probably a day or two before before a couple of days before he announced, he was doing an interview and they said, what would cause you to want to get out? What would cause you to drop out of the race? He said, well, a medical could maybe a medical condition is probably the only thing that would caused me to want to drop out at this point. And then a day or two later, he comes down with COVID. A couple of days after that, he drops out. And Kamala Harris is then, excuse me, gets his endorsement. Enthusiasm rises exponentially within the Democratic Party, and now we're all rah rah Kamala. Is that not possible?
I mean, if you want to entertain conspiracy theories, by all means, you can use the platform. I guess maybe it's the lawyer in me. I don't entertain that.
Yeah.
But I will say, interesting enough, what has gone around is this video of Gerald Ford being asked the question, how can a woman be president? And he says, well, it'll probably take a male president and a female vice president. Something the male president probably dies or comes to a position where he can't do anymore, and the female vice president becomes president. And so in his answering of that question, he laid out that that was probably the only way you're going to see a female vice president. And so, but he ended that quote by saying, if that were to happen, do know that it will be extremely hard to ever not have a female president. Because once you have that first, I guess implying she is going to be so good
Mm.
that it is going to be hard for people not to rally behind more women being in that type of leadership role. And so if the Republican Party wants to use this to say, hey, if this happens, white males, you could forget ever being in a position of power again. I can definitely see the MAGA campaign taking that clip and putting it in that context.
I don't doubt that. I certainly once you break through that ceiling, opportunities abound then thereafter. Um, but even if that was, and I know you call it a conspiracy theory, and it could be a
I mean, it's a
conspiracy theory.
theory. It's not.
It's
It's
a
not.
theory. It doesn't
It's not
necessarily
I
doesn't
meant to
have to be a
say,
conspiracy
don't
necessarily.
turn theories into history. Okay, that's the
I'm not.
problem we have now.
I'm not saying it's a theory. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a conspiracy. It's something that says, "Hey, we don't know all of the backdoor dealings in politics. We don't know, for example, when Biden was considering running for 2016, the conversations that went on between him and Barack to say, okay, I'm going to support Hillary, and then after that." Then I'll throw my support behind you a couple years later, whatever. Blah blah blah. We don't know all those backdoor dealings, but we have to at least consider. I think it's prudent.
Do we have to? I don't think
We don't
consider,
have to.
because again,
But
you
I
can
think it's
make 20
prudent.
different theories behind that, and that you can find yourself spinning wheels over and over again. No, you do not have to consider all conspiracy theories or
You don't
theories,
have to.
you want to call it.
But
But
I
I
think
do
it's
encourage
prudent. Let me
people.
finish my point. Let me finish my point. You don't have to, and I corrected myself. You don't have to, but I do think that it's prudent to do that. The reason why I think it's prudent to do it because it's when you don't interrogate every occurrence that goes on, then you make yourself subject to being deluded and led down a pathway ignorantly. So I interrogate every situation that I see, and frankly, even if it did happen that way, I think, man, that's a brilliant strategy of the Democratic Party. So
Well,
it's not that I hate them for doing it, but I'm like, man, that as long as it's legal and it's strategic and it works for them, man, it's a heck of a chess move.
Well, and I'm telling the viewers, I think it's more prudent for you to look at the policies, look at what the candidates have stood for, look at their history, look at their background, and make your decision based on that. Though that
Well,
to me is more solid proof than whatever conspiracy you think might have happened behind the room that is not being put out in front of you.
well,
Because
Kamala didn't get it because of her policies. Kamala didn't get
yes,
this
she did. I
nomination.
mean,
She didn't get
again,
this nomination because of her
you
policies.
discredit her role when she was a prosecutor. You discredit her role when she
I
was a
don't discredit
prosecutor.
any of
Yes, you
that.
do, because
Okay.
to become the VP, she has to have had a history of
She's very qualified. Let me
government.
say that.
Okay, and
She's
so
very qualified. I'm going to,
and so
but
that's
what
why
I'm
I'm saying
telling,
to the viewers. So see, now I can't finish. So
go
let
ahead.
me
Go
stop.
ahead.
No, no, let me stop.
Okay. If you want to stop, I'll stop. But no, but here's the thing. I don't want you to misrepresent what I'm saying. I'm not discrediting her at all. I think she's very capable. In fact, in 2020, I wanted her to be the nominee. And I would rather her have been the nominee, and I recognized that America wasn't quite ready for it. And so my pick in that I said Joe Biden for president, Kamala Harris for vice president, and it just so happens to be that's the way that it came out. But I do believe that she did not get this nomination based off of her policies. She got this nomination based off of circumstance and an endorsement. And now doesn't undermine her capability and her credibility and her fitness for the job. It doesn't undermine it at all. But by the same token, I'm not going to be deluded by how she actually got this because I'll state it again. I do think that if Joe Biden said earlier in the year, I'm not going to run, and Kamala had to be put into a primary race with Gavin Newsom and a whole bunch of other candidates who throw their head. Hakeem Jeffries may have even, or Cory Booker, or whoever. You know, all these other people. She probably would not have risen to the level because we saw her performance already in 2020. I
Okay, and
don't know
again,
what's going to happen.
I disagree. I think it does dilute her experience. I think it does dilute even the works not only that she's done as vice president, but also the work she's done as Senate. Because again, Joe Biden would not have picked a person as their VP unless they are aligned with some of the policies that they have. So to say that her policies are irrelevant as this, I think also again undermines her history and her experience. But also even with your conspiracy of, oh well, if she was actually running to be the primary nominee, Governor Newsom, blah, blah, would have been a challenge. First of all, I don't even think they probably would have ran because, again, you have a vice president, has a little bit more experience, has a little bit more understanding of what the agenda is. And we've seen over and over again, a lot of times Republican nominees fall out when the VP is running. So that's why, again, I say it does undermine all of her experience, all of her qualifications to say that she did not earn this
Mhm.
nomination.
Again, all speculation. All speculation. You believe that they would not have run. I believe that they would have.
I don't think it's
And
speculation that
it
Joe
is
Biden picked her as
speculation that
VP.
I,
That Joe Biden picked her as VP based on her history at the Senate, based on what she did. I don't think that's speculation at all.
hear
But
what I'm
I agree
saying.
that you think
I've
that
said what I'm saying because you see you like to misrepresent what I'm saying. What I'm saying is
you just sound
speculation.
like I disagree, but with your
What
assessment.
what I'm saying is
So go
speculation
ahead.
is your assertion that they would not have thrown their hat in the race because she was a VP.
Based
And
on
and
history. But
and
yeah,
the
know
and let me give you a little bit of recent history.
that.
Even at this late stage in the game, what's the senator Joe Manchin was even
And
considering
Joe Manchin was not going to win a nominee over Kamala. I mean, so that's not
against
even
again
not
against
even like
speculation
there
against
you go.
speculation.
That's not even
But
speculation. You
but
know?
if we
There's a
go
reason
back,
why when Joe Manchin said, "Let me put my hat back in," people looked at him like, "Are you crazy?" And he said, "You know what? Let me not," because I realized
exactly.
that
And
was
guess
not going to
guess
work
when
in
that
my
guess when that
favor.
happened? Guess when that happened? That happened in late
So
July. That
again,
happened in late
but I
July.
mean,
If that happened, if
people have
that man,
talked about Joe
let
Manchin
me
and
finish. Let me
cinema as
finish.
being anti-democratic for years. So to
Okay,
sit here and say that he was going to be in a better lead position to be the nominee over Kamala had they had a primary race, okay, fine. If that's where you want to go,
I'm
I
not
again
saying
that
that he would
discredits
have
her
been.
history as VP. It
I'm
discredits her
saying
qualifications as the senator. It discredits all the stuff that she done as an AG and as a prosecutor.
I'm saying that certainly somebody would have run against her. And a very likely contender would have been Joe Manchin. If Joe Biden had decided in October of last year that he was, or even in February of this year, that he was not running for the presidency, you can be assured that there would have been other contenders for the Democratic nomination. And Kamala Harris would have then had to fight a little bit more to prove her worthiness for it. Now, I don't believe that. I believe that she's very worthy for it. Now, don't misconstrue or misrepresent anything that I'm saying. I think she has an outstanding record as a prosecutor, as an AG, as a senator, as a VP. As a VP, I'm proud of the work that she's done, and I probably still would have supported her. But the reality is that we still only represent about 13% of America as Black people, and then the
Oh my gosh.
Democrats. Simmer down. I'm looking at the demographics that actually support her. The demographics that support her. 40%. I'm sorry, 30 or so percent of Americans identify as Democrat. And so what would have happened was you start looking at all these different demographics that support her now. Those allegiances would have been divided between multiple other candidates had there been enough time. And her chances of becoming the nominee would undoubtedly have been less than they are right now.
Well, we'll let the viewers decide because I can't even respond to, again, the level of disrespect that you just gave the VP.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the grassroots that she has sparked. So there was a Win with Black Women call, and again, I was fortunate enough to get on. I got on at the very last minute, so the calls probably started at 8:30. I didn't really get on until 11. And part of that reason is because it was so hard to get on because they kept having to, I guess, ask Zoom for more capacity. um, but nonetheless, when I was able to get on, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because I know there's some sacredty and some of the stuff that was discussed. But Star Jones was on there just really giving us the rule book on not only what some of her policies are in terms of what Kamala Harris is trying to do, but also ways in which we could help. And to then hear so many people, and again, I came on late, so I'd imagine it was a lot of stories piggybacking on not only what Kamala Harris has done, but also the ways in which we could help. But to just see people a little bit more so in their natural element. And it probably could sound superficial, and I apologize if it does, but it created just a little bit more of a relativeness with each other, like a closeness. This isn't Star Jones all made up. This is just her in her naturalness. So many other famous people that joined. And again, I don't want to put everyone out there because maybe or maybe not, they don't want to do a public endorsement. But did you see them in their natural element talking about not only what some of her policies has meant for them, but also seeing that representation, what that means for them, and then actually putting in not only money but time and effort to support her, what that has meant. It was truly inspiring. And then, of course, it was over 44,000, and I think raised over $1 million within one night. And then we see the Black men saying, "Okay, we're going to top that," which is nice to see. And I didn't get on that call. Because because again, I think there's some sacredness to that. But I did hear about Bakari Sellers also going in his personal relationship with Kamala and got really emotional about that. But I also heard there were a lot of men challenging this. Hey, there is this narrative that we don't support Black women enough. And we need to not only make sure we are supporting this candidate, but also protecting the candidate. And that equally warms my heart because, and I know we've talked about this on the show a lot of times, but we still want to see Black men as our protectors, and we want them to see themselves as our protectors as well. And so to hear that that was also a huge talking point in that call, just how can we make sure we are protecting this woman, this sister, this Black woman, as she is trying to go for the highest position in the land, equally made the week great. And then to hear the Latinas decided to do a call. And Anna Navarro, and the only reason I mentioned her is because she said she was on the call on The View. But she did get on the Women with Black Women call and asked for more support for brown women. And part of me was thinking, why don't you rally around your fellow brown women? Because it's always as if, we say oftentimes, or at least Malcolm X and a lot of people support what he says, that Black women are the least protected. So it's like you're asking the least protected to then include you. You guys are more protected than we are. But to see and hear that they subsequently got their own call, raised a lot of money. And then we culminated with white women doing their call. And again, I wasn't on their call, but I've heard it was a lot of accountability on that call. Some people were calling out, hey, you guys didn't rally and support Hillary Clinton. See, that has cost us. So now let's come together and rally and support Kamala Harris so that we do not lose out on some of the rights that we've lost out by not supporting. And the fact that they raised over 2 million in one night, and I think it's gone up even more from there, has been, again, that grassroots has been equally amazing. And that's why to suggest that, that Kamala Harris would not have provoked all that before, I would say discredits the fact that we weren't just on this call because she's Black. No, we were talking about the policies. We were talking about what the what's at stake in this democracy, and whether or not she will ensure that what's at stake is not hindered. I think is what's so important about this. And so to see all that in a matter of a week, and I think they said that has raised so much money, and of course she's raised probably over 200 million a week. And so that's why I say I'm sure there was a lot of that is still elite donors that are putting in a lot of money. But that is unprecedented, unheard of. And I will say, to your credit, does, when you see people now crash and zoom, because then they're talking about the numbers, that then does give you a little bit more hope in that okay, maybe this is what people want. Maybe we are ready for this, because the polls now are saying that they're equal, or that she's maybe slightly above. But again, I don't want to rest on polls, because they also said Hillary Clinton was going to win, and we saw how that turned out. So but I will rest on just seeing so many people excited, galvanizing, raising money. I think they said 200 plus percent plus increase in new not only new volunteers but new registered voters. And that's before Taylor Swift takes the mic, because I'm sure her and Beyonce are probably gonna equally show their support around her. And so it's nice to see that people haven't completely given up on this government just yet.
Well, that's all good. I think it's fantastic. I love the enthusiasm that has been sparked. But I do also realize that the enthusiasm didn't occur in a vacuum. and that there were a lot of
Never does.
events,
Never does.
and there were a lot of events that helped to develop that anticipated enthusiasm. It's kind of like, and I used to use the analogy like when I was just be a funeral director and we're conducting the funeral. We're upstairs, but we can smell the food cooking for the repast. And you start getting the aroma of that, and then you realize, man, I can't have this. I can't have it. And then all of a sudden, when the funeral is over and everybody finally returns to the repast, the anticipation has been built for the food because you have been smelling it all along. And so you're a little bit more excited about when you go and sit down at that table. But if you go sit down at that table and the food is not good, then your response is going to be one of disappointment. And I use this as, and I hate to use the example of a funeral in reference to Joe Biden, but the reality of it was that people were in a sad place with their political choices, and nobody wanted to see. Well, I won't say nobody, but
Because
in
I don't even
general,
think I ever knew.
in
As
general,
long as I can remember,
the polls.
people are in places when it comes to their candidates. I have seen people talk back when it was George Bush, back when, even before then, people talk about when you are voting for particularly presidential elections, you are choosing the lesser of two evils. And there's a reason why, even before the Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who both brought in record numbers of voters during that election, there's a reason why before that, there weren't a lot of people voting. So I don't want this narrative to be, oh, there's been years after years, everyone's excited, but then this year people were just down. No, no, no.
You might
No,
not want it to
that's
be that
not
way.
true.
You
But
might
that's
not
not
want it to
true.
be that way,
Facts are
but
facts. That's not true, though.
again,
And the
according to
polls are
whatever
not
your fact.
facts.
So
Both.
what facts are you relying on? What facts are you
I'm
relying on?
relying on the numbers of people that voted in
What?
previous elections and the fact that Joe Biden and Donald Trump brought in record numbers. But before
So
those,
how do
there
you
were
gauge
record
their
downs in
enthusiasm?
those elections. So to say
What
that,
what facts
oh,
are you using to
every
gauge
year,
enthusiasm?
again, I'm using the numbers that of people that have voted in previous
But
elections.
does
What
that mean that
that
you're
has
enthusiastic about your candidate? It
and I'm
does
saying
not mean
those
that
are not
just because you vote,
enthusiastic numbers in previous elections. That's what I'm saying. And so,
just
yet
because you
again,
vote, does
Joe
not mean
Biden
that
and
you were
Donald Trump
enthusiastic
brought
about your
in
candidate.
record number of voters. But I'm saying there's been a history of a lack of enthusiasm of candidates. You hear over and over again,
Yeah.
you are picking the lesser of two evils when it comes to elections in government. And
Okay.
so if that is
So
it's the consistent
I'm going
theme
to
in
finish my point.
elections, then
I'm going
there's
to
no
finish my point now.
enthusiasm to pick the lesser of two evils.
Okay, great. So I'm going to finish my point
Okay, so
now.
you
Thank
dismissed
you.
that.
Now,
So again, okay,
no,
great.
you interrupted. You
And
interrupted me.
unfortunately,
You interrupted my
yes, I have a
analogy.
hard stop, so I gotta sign off.
You
So now you can
interrupted
finish your
my
point
analogy,
without me.
and the point was
Without me.
that there is no evidence of enthusiasm other than people's suspicions and having going out and talking to different people and say, "Hey, are you enthusiastic about this or not?" The reality is that the best thing that we have to rely on are polls. Polls, granted, are sometimes inconsistent and unreliable, and they may not necessarily represent the sentiment of America. But the best thing that we have to go off of are scientific, systematic, random polls. Now, granted, there's always going to be a bias imposed by that poll uh, based off of the people who actually respond. Only a certain type of person often will take time to engage in the polls. And they factor all those things into their interpretations of those polls. But when our polls show that people just were not enthusiastic about either candidate, and we don't have any other way to measure their level of enthusiasm unless you start looking at their giving, individual grassroots giving, as I mentioned before. And so neither candidate were very neither candidate instilled a lot of enthusiasm in the American people. So we're basically at a funeral, and now all of a sudden we can smell the food. The food is cooking, and we can smell it in the background. And basically, it's Joe Biden really about ready to just step down. And we say there needs to be another candidate. We all anticipate the arrival and the introduction of another alternative compared to these two candidates that 70% of Americans, 70+% of Americans said, I don't want either one of them. And so now there's a great anticipation about a new candidate coming. And when that new candidate is finally introduced, of course, you're like, finally, this is what we've been waiting for. And so, of course, there's going to be some enthusiasm that generates as a result of now having it being exposed to and introduced to the thing that you have been longing for and anticipating. It doesn't always mean that it's going to turn out that way. So we're all excited at this moment in time about, I don't know that we're all excited, but many people are excited about the candidacy of Kamala Harris, because we have been, for a moment, we thought we were going to be left only with squash and rutabagas on our plate. And now we got some meat. We got some food that seems like it's going to be, excuse me, appetizing to the American people in terms of politics. Only time will tell if whether or not she lives up to the hype that has been generated and that has developed about her candidacy. I love the fact that she's doing these Zoom meetings, as Sonia mentioned before, reaching out on a grassroots level. I don't think that I've heard such a strategy be used in the past by any other candidate, but that I think is whoever came up with that notion to get on a Zoom call with these tens of thousands and now hundreds of thousands of people. I think that is absolutely incredible. That's the way to stimulate and invigorate your base to get out there and start spending some money, get out there and start volunteering. And it seems to be working well for Kamala. I was watching a commentator the other day who was saying that now she just has to get out to some interviews. Now we see her down on one-on-one interviews when she has to be now challenged not only on what her policies are, projected policies are, but also on what her past history has been. She's got some questions to answer, particularly to Black men. And I get that on the call, we were talking about on the call, they were talking about how, as Black men, we need to be protecting these women. We need to protect Kamala, and I agree with that. But sometimes we misconstrue, and I know Sonia, and I won't talk too much about it. But the minute you mention something about a criticism or critique of somebody, that's viewed by a lot of people as not really supporting or protecting them. But the reality of it is, I think the Bible says something to the extent that the rebuke of a friend is better than the kiss of an enemy. And so what happened, the strong rebuke of a friend is better than the kiss of an enemy. And so what happens is that we always want all the nice, frilly, kissy, feel good type of things. And that we view that as being supportive. We view that as being protective. But somebody has to say, hey, this is your vulnerability. And I need you to address this vulnerability. That's protection as well. In fact, that's a protection that we need to offer. I criticize the Republican Party and a lot of conservatives by the way they say that they become a friend to Israel. And so what they do is they support anything that Israel says or does. But a true friend doesn't do that. A true friend knows how to correct when there is and when you're out of line. They know how to admonish you and bring you back into to a right standing and to perhaps a better standing. Not saying that, Sanyan, I hear you already talking about, oh, so now a man needs to tell a woman how to get into better standing. No, I'm not saying that. But men, as male voters, we do have some issues. And there are a lot of Black men who have issues about her history and her record as a DA, as an attorney general. We have some questions about those things. And she's going to have to sit down at the table and answer those. She's going to have to put on her good big girl draws and answer those questions. She can and she will. I have no doubt about that. And I'm sure she'll answer them to our satisfaction. But that still needs to happen. We can't act as if she never supported defund the police. We can't act as if she's never said we should ban plastic straws or whatever that it's all about. But there are some things that she has said in the 2020 in her run for the 2020 election that she's going to have to give an account for today. She's going to have to give an account for her absence at the border. Yes, she's got plenty of things to defend that. She can say, hey, listen, we tried, our administration, the Biden Harris administration tried to pass legislation, groundbreaking legislation to deal with the immigration problem, but the Republicans refused it. She can sit down and say that the immigration today illegal migration today across the border is lower than it was when Trump left office. She can defend those things. But the point is that she has to do it. And that when she does that, we will all be sitting down at the table and finally tasting the meal that we have been anticipating because we've been smelling the aroma of it. And now we're sitting right here and we get to taste it and find out, is it everything that it was cracked up to be? And so only time will tell. We're excited about this current election season. Um, I'm hopeful, and as a lot of people are now hopeful about preventing another Trump presidency because of the harm that many of us feel that it will cause if he is elected again. So much to come in the coming weeks and much to discuss as the presidential campaign proceeds. And so we look forward to discussing all of those things on the Roundtable Consult. Obviously, you can catch us here every week. Every week, we're here at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch us on your favorite broadcast, on your favorite podcast listening platform. You can also catch us on Star Radio every week. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube. Again, until next week, we look forward to having more information come out. And as soon as it does, we will share it with you. Be blessed until next week.